People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Somebody is going to program the next generation. Someone is going to tell them what's true, what's moral, what's normal, what to worship, what to fear, and who to obey. We like to pretend kids are taught by lectures and rules, but the truth is, their beliefs, they're caught, not taught. They catch ideas from the stories we put in front of them. The heroes we cheer for, the villains we excuse, and the worlds we let live rent-free in their heads. Movies are the most powerful brainwashing device human beings ever built. Every frame, every adventure, every love story, every sacrifice, they all whisper something about what the world is and who you're supposed to be inside of it. Some stories say, sit down, obey, the experts have it handled. Nothing bad ever really happens. The lights will never go out. The grocery stores never run out. The government would never lie to you. Those stories are comfortable, and they're everywhere. But then, there are others. Ones that poke a stick in the eye of polite civilization and say, look closer. Question this. What if the system doesn't just fail you, but hunts you? A kid watches The Patriot and learns that country and government are not the same thing.
Wars are not fought only by childless men. Granted.
They watch Gattaca and they realize they are more than a label or a test score.
You want to know how I did it? This is how I did it, Anton. I never saved anything for the swim back.
They watch Children of Men and understand what it looks like when a society gives up on the future. They watch Jericho or The Road and finally feel deep in their bones how thin the line actually is between normal life and no one coming to save you. The default setting is indoctrination. All we get to choose is by who. You don't need a classroom. You don't need a podium. You need a movie night. A stack of films that say, question everything. Know your history. See the cracks in power and understand the depravity of man and still choose to be a good one.
Wait until you see. See what?
Stories that teach the next generation to keep their eyes open, their hearts anchored, and their hands capable when the lights begin to flicker. This video is our playbook, the movies that rewired how we see government, war, history, collapse, and survival. The films we're handing to the next generation like time bombs of ideas, because the world is absolutely going to try to shape them. The only question is, will they walk into that world asleep or already asking the right questions?
Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea, Mr. Creedy. And ideas are bulletproof.
If you've been around this channel for a while, you know us for the hands-on stuff. The guns, the gear, the medical, the preparing, the drones, and of course the gratuitous amount of blank fire, headshots, and fake blood. That is not changing. But if the last few years have taught us anything, it is this. You can own all of the right equipment and still lose if your mind is running someone else's operating system.
And this is because before any of us are old enough to pick up a rifle, a radio, a tourniquet, or an FPV drone rigged up with a Fanta bottle full of ball bearings and a contact fuse as it zooms its way to kiss a bad guy and close that circuit, before you pick up any of that stuff, you pick up a story, an idea, a paradigm, a worldview that gives you perspective in everything that you do in your life. Sometimes it's a story about what government is, or about what your fellow man is capable of, about what normal life looks like, and how fragile it actually really is.
And most of those stories don't come from textbooks, at least the accurate ones don't. They come from the most ancient of American family traditions, movie nights. From the films your parents put on when you were supposed to be asleep, to the shows that you had to sneak over to a friend's house to watch because you weren't allowed to watch otherwise, all the way to rented out VHS tapes that you never returned and wore out from watching over and over again. Cinema is the source of the stuff that we as kids grew up quoting without even realizing how it was shaping us.
And that's why we are making this video. We want to be as intentional about training the mind as we are about training the body, the trigger finger, and the skill sets. Because at the end of the day, movies and shows, they're one of, if not the best tool for doing just that. So in this video, we are opening up our own library.
Now, in this library, these are the films that wrecked us, rewired how we see history, government, war, collapse, and survival. And they nudged us toward the unconventional, prepared, skeptical, and yet hopeful lifestyles that we're living now. One founded on building something strong enough to weather whatever hell may come in this generation or the next.
And we believe that if someone is going to inception the next generation with ideas, it better be us, and by us we mean you. And it better be with stories that teach other people, our kids, the next generation, our friends, how to think, prepare, and ultimately how to build over break. And we're going to walk through some of our favorites, some of our favorite movies and shows, why they matter, what conversations they can spark with your family and friends, and how they secretly double as training reps for your mind and the world we actually live in.
Now, with that being said, please note that this list started in the hundreds, but we narrowed it down to a good blend of old and modern. And for all you parents watching this, please remember that we are not the leaders of your household. Most of these films are not appropriate for all ages. Every person is different from age to maturity and experience, as well as interests, will dictate when you decide to introduce these works of art to your family. Now, you should watch these first and decide whether they're appropriate or not. Also note that not all of these movies have content in them that we 100% agree with or are even accurate to history, but they all set you up to have conversations where you can dive into the truths of what is what. In fact, for every film or show that we mention, we're going to give you a few questions that you can ask over breakfast or a car ride. This should help you guys get the wheels turning in good conversation with your family.
And for all of you dudes out there who you don't have kids, you're not too worried about the next generation, but you do have some friends that you would love to share awesome movies with, and you're just looking for a banging film playlist to share with them, you're going to have a good time. So with that being said, is everyone set?
I'm set.
Camera speeds.
Action. Guys, you're going to want to watch this sponsor section because we're going to integrate some of our favorite movies into the sponsors as well. The first one being Avon Protection. They've historically been known as the best manufacturers of gas masks in the world. And one of my favorite movies that shows Avon gas masks is called 6 Days. It's not super well known, but it chronicles the Iranian embassy siege in 1980 where British SAS have to go in and kill a bunch of bad guys. And they do so historically with the Avon S6 gas mask. Now in the movie, they use the S10, which was a later iteration of it, but Avon masks, gas masks, have become iconic the world over. They're still used today, although they're even better today. Like the modern versions of Avon gas masks are awesome. Now we as civilians can actually own them. So if you're looking for a world-class gas mask, literally, that our own military and own special operations use, check out Avon Protection.
Next, guys, we have Wetworks. So when I think about Wetworks in movies, I think about the kinds of products.
Which one are you thinking of? 3, 2, 1.
Tears of the
Sun.
Ah, did we just become best
Yes,
friends?
that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Do you want to go do karate in the garage?
Yes.
So I think about cutting-edge products integrated or pushed into content. So as an example, I'll watch something like Tears of the Sun, and I'll see guys wearing split rigs, maybe even a little bit of slick plate carriers, as well as like forming a hood, a wraith hood, if you will, while you're walking around in the jungle.
They would look so much cooler walking around with wraith hoods.
Exactly.
And it would be effective.
Yeah, and plus the fact is, if you're in the jungle, they don't retain moisture. So you wouldn't be like walking around with a big piece of cotton over your head.
You actually really thought that through, yeah.
I did, yeah, absolutely. So anyway, we do have a discount code for Wetworks down in the description.
Next is Ammo Squared. If you shoot a lot like us, you constantly find yourself kind of like running out of ammo. The cool thing about Ammo Squared is that you can take a certain amount of money and deposit it into your account, and when you've hit a certain amount, you can choose the ammos that you like the most or that you use the most, whether it's 9mm, 5.56, 7.62 if you're one of those guys. And when you hit a certain amount, it will auto ship it to you. So you pretty much kind of always stay stocked up on ammo. And on top of that, they usually have pretty good prices. So check out Ammo Squared. And when I think about ammo, the first movie that I think about is Lord of War, which is actually like, I'm not a big fan of the propaganda that movie's trying to push. However, the life of the bullet scene where it shows like the manufacturing of it all,
Very
like
true.
it's dope. So
That's true.
Yeah, check out Ammo Squared.
Next, guys, when we think about Onyx off-road, this one's going to be a little bit of a stretch here, but what would it be like if Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant had Onyx off-road? Like, the technology still existed.
Yeah.
Like, he still had those satellites up there.
You take the technology of having like world-class GPS and world-class navigation all in a phone.
Not to mention he could be like, oh, I can tell based on what's going on out there, a huge snowstorm is going to hit me.
And I can mark up like, hey, there are bear here in this area, avoid, right?
Exactly.
Like, and then share that, or like, you know, or actually put the wrong things in there and send those to his, like, you know, his
he could
rivals.
take a picture of a cache and then be like, it's actually all the way over here, when really it's over there.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're looking for ways to navigate in the most modern and honestly futuristic ways, we do have a discount code that makes it very inexpensive for a full year. And you can look at satellite imagery, you can take pictures and send it to your buddies in encrypted forms, as well as also just use it for a mapping system.
It's our go-to map, like navigation system.
Exactly. Now, with all of that, let's talk about some movies. All right, let's start off with a movie that you've probably already seen before, but a movie that will hit you differently depending on where you're at in life. The Patriot. The Patriot is an American classic that reminds us of key truths that are often forgotten or left out of civilized conversation. Now, for example, Mel Gibson is told in the beginning of the movie that, quote, wars are not fought by childless men. And unlike many other war movies, there is a knife's edge that every protagonist in the story walks as they balance the safety of their families and the freedom of future generations. Some men disregard their own safety and wage war so that their children have a beautiful future, only to return home and find the death of everything that they loved and fought for. Now, this is not a historically accurate movie in many ways, as it pulls from the French and Indian War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, and the Revolutionary War. Still, this story transcends time as it sheds light on the realities of war, both past, present, and future.
Now, most people have seen this movie, and the character of Benjamin Martin, played by Mel Gibson, is absolutely iconic. But if you want to know one of the guys his story was based on, you should look into Captain Jack Henson, who was the most prolific sniper in the Civil War. The guy's an absolute legend. And he tried to remain neutral like many in Tennessee and Kentucky at the time until his sons were executed by Union soldiers, and he began a covert one-man war of vengeance throughout the war. And he even survived the war, and his story and the Patriot as a whole shows the tension between being a loyal subject or a citizen with freedom and agency, and who decides when obedience ends. It also shows how men follow orders to the point of committing atrocities, and how local knowledge, irregular tactics, and community networks can beat a bigger, better, and more well-equipped empire. When is it right to pick up a rifle for a cause, and when is it just ego or revenge dressed up as patriotism?
Which characters actually fight for principles, and who is just following orders or their own emotions?
If something similar happened today, what would guerrilla resistance look like in your town that you live in? Snowpiercer. Now, most people watch this and think it's a commentary on late-stage capitalism, but it's really just about the balance of power and how elites and institutions over time begin to treat normal people as slaves instead of human beings. And it takes place on the Snowpiercer, which is a bullet train in an iced-over world in which each section of the train is a different class of society. The front cars are elites living in absurd luxury, the middle cars are workers, functionaries, and security, and the tail section is the poor, disposable labor, and they're packed into filth and eating things like protein bricks instead of luxurious meals. And while I don't believe that any society is ever truly equal, because merit and hard work does matter, and you should be able to move up and down based on how hard you work, how good your work is, or how lazy you are, this movie does show that when any form of government has a monopoly on power, inequality becomes manufactured. It even goes to show that rebellions are often planned and allowed as a pressure release valve, not a path to liberation, and to excuse even tighter authoritarian control. And scarcity of resources is created as a way to foster this dynamic. People are even told, if you damage the system, you hurt yourselves, because in the world of Snowpiercer, leaving the train is certain death in the ice age they're living in. I mean, when was the last time we heard that? Oh, I don't know, maybe with the Epstein files, you know? Like, if we release this, it could damage our government. Like, okay, well, damage it. It also shows that control over populations isn't just with force. It's sustained with stories, myths, and indoctrination that make oppression feel normal, patriotic, and even noble. which is disgusting. What are the cars on our train? School, media, jobs, politics, and where would you be placed? Do you think our society allows for real change or just controlled revolutions that keep the system intact? What does getting off the train look like in real life for you? Whether it's financial, geographic, maybe it's your lifestyle, what does it look like? District 9, first of all, it's just an amazing show. Your family's gonna love you because it's just fun and it's awesome. And it shows how none of us should ever assume that the system will ever protect you, because the moment you fall out of favor, you may need allies that you never expected.
If you woke up as a prawn tomorrow, what would change about the ways that you see police, corporations, and your neighbors? Number 2, how do governments make it socially acceptable to mistreat certain groups? Have you ever believed a story about a group of people and then later realized it was propaganda or incomplete?
The Eternaut. It's a foreign film that shows how quickly society can fall apart after a disastrous event, how starvation and desperation turn communities insane, and how friends can turn on each other for even the most basic of goods. It also shows how in desperate times, one of the only things that can hold people together is a common goal. You see how people will kill one another for canned goods, and at the same time, how people will die for one another to accomplish a task. Who do you trust more to survive, institutions or your little group of neighbors, and why? Number 2, how quickly would you obey an order to stay inside, evacuate, or comply if the sky turned deadly here? That one's actually not too hard to answer. How did you act whenever the COVID lockdowns hit? And regardless of your answer, what did you learn, and how would you do it differently next time? And number 3, if this happened in your neighborhood, who would you immediately team up with, and who would you immediately start to avoid? Andor. Andor is an epic case study on the rise of rebellions and the fall of empires. It also shines a light on the brutality and the gray zone of rebellions and how good men often do bad things. It also shows how empires and institutions eat their own and how any successful rebellion has to wage war on every front. From guerrilla warfare to politics to planning and logistics and production and supply, it shows the dark side of being the good guy and how any revolution or rebellion often disfigures the character of their greatest leaders in the pursuit of justice and freedom. The writers of Andor pulled from numerous rebellions and revolutions throughout history, and the 2 seasons of the show completely capture all the major aspects of what overthrowing an empire entails, better than any book or any movie that I've ever seen. It gets personal too, though. It shows how a normal, selfish dude slowly goes from, how does this benefit me, to I must do this for others. And it gets personal on the bad guy side by showing the banality of empire, how paper pushers, bureaucrats, functionaries, they all justify their actions because they're detached from the execution of those policies and decisions. And from a preparedness side, it shows how network building, compartmentalization, cell structures, and using normal life as cover are huge force multipliers for thwarting a tyrannical empire. This is an absolute must watch for everyone, even if you don't care about Star Wars. What finally pushes Cassian from just trying to survive to, I have to be a part of this fight? Number 2, which type of characters keep the Empire running more? The true believers, the careerists, or the scared? And number 3, if you lived in that universe, what kind of resistance work would fit your personality and your current skill set?
Chernobyl. Now, this is a 5-episode HBO miniseries that dramatizes the real-life 1986 nuclear disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Soviet Ukraine. And while the focus is on the radiation poisoning and the graphic historical events, the hidden purpose of the show seems to be exposing the failures of communistic governments. And at every turn, those in power shift blame, deny the truth, and lie to cover up the reality of what's going on. Anyone who wants to address the situation is hamstrung by the fear of Big Brother. Now, if you want to start conversations around the failures of a socialistic system on any scale, this is a great place to start.
It also shows how moral workers and experts are often trying to do the right thing and be transparent and solve problems, but their leaders or politicians massage the messaging to the public. If you've ever worked a job where a company was made successful in spite of terrible leadership by hardworking people who were bought into the vision and were willing to go to great lengths to accomplish the mission, you will resonate with Chernobyl. Because what happens to a country, a nation, or even a company where leadership is woefully incompetent and too prideful to even recognize it, but the people keep it afloat via their hard work and their determination? Chernobyl answers that question. It shows what happens on a grand scale. Eventually something breaks. And what happens when everyone who works at a company is smarter and wiser than the person calling the shots? Chernobyl answers that question at the highest level.
Now, this actually reminds me of the movie Titanic. And to be fully transparent, I've only seen Titanic once, and the one time was with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. Long story short, I don't really remember the movie Titanic all that well. But the one thing that we all remember is that when the Titanic was sinking, those in charge fully understood that death was imminent for most. So what they did was they wasted people's time by playing music and rearranging the deck chairs. And this is much like a relationship that is beyond the point of resolution. You can cling to comfort and lose everything when the inevitable is finally happening, or you can take action and be of value elsewhere. Sometimes the best thing for you to do is to take off your PPE, personal protective equipment, and work yourself to death for the sake of your children's future. And other times, you need to pull your head out of the sand and give yourself a fighting chance elsewhere. Why do so many people go along with obvious lies about the danger? Do you think our institutions would behave differently in a similar disaster? What information would you want before an event like this to protect your family? The Death of Stalin. So this addresses the same communistic ideas as Chernobyl, but it allows the audience to digest the lunacy of socialist culture in a humorous way. Now, the movie starts with Joseph Stalin found dead in his office as more and more of his advisors and political leaders get involved while denying the truth of his demise. And much like watching a child try to reason with his friends, we get to watch grown men convince themselves and others that what they're seeing with their own eyes is a lie. Meanwhile, we know that everyone in the room fully comprehends the gravity of the situation. The vacuum of power, coupled with the fear of being seen as too aggressive or too weak, leads to a wild turn of events. And this is a phenomenal way to view those with delusional political ideas, call out the reality, and laugh at the humor.
Yeah, you know, the craziest part about this movie is how accurate it actually is. You think you're watching a comedy until you realize the transfer of power in communist regimes is literally this absurd. I mean, it shows how powerful people still, inside of a dictatorship, are still just people, but they're constantly lying and self-editing for their own preservation. Why does everyone in that system lie, even when the truth is obvious? What parts of modern politics feel like this, where everyone is afraid to say the obvious thing? Would you rather be safe and silent in that world, or be honest and risk your livelihood or potentially even your life?
All right, next we have Johnny Tremain. So Johnny Tremain in this story is a talented 14-year-old silversmith apprentice in colonial Boston. He's proud, hot-tempered, and he dreams of becoming a master craftsman. A terrible accident cripples his hand and destroys his future in the trade, which forces him into a completely different life. He ends up working as a writer and messenger for the Sons of Liberty, becoming personally involved with figures like Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, and John Adams as the American Revolution ignites. Now, this is a very wholesome look at the issues and oppression that early Americans faced as they worked to enact change without conflict. This is a great old movie to watch with young kids or those who are old enough to grasp the concepts of oppressive governments. What changes Johnny from caring about only himself to caring about a larger cause? How do small personal injustices wake people up politically? What skill would you want to bring to a movement like the Sons of Liberty?
Captain Fantastic. It's a fantastic movie. It makes you second guess sending your kids off to Caesar, and it shows the story of a father who has to fight everyone in his life to justify raising his kids the way that he thinks is best. And it shows the struggles the kids have, but ultimately how a dad raises a family in an unconventional way by modern standards. He raises his kids to question consumerism, but not to reject it entirely. And he also stresses the importance of being intellectually and physically capable. It shows both the strengths and the blind spots of off-grid living, which can lead to a great discussion on finding the balance between resilience and social connection. Which parts of their lifestyle make the kids strong, free thinkers, and which part feels like the dad just trying to exert control? Number two, how do you balance protecting your kids from a broken culture versus preparing them to live in it? What real-world skills from that family do you most want in your own home?
Braveheart. This is a very easy movie to get through if you just pick up your phone and ignore the politics or character development. Now, if you choose to actually follow the storyline, you may be crushed. An oppressive Britain strangles the Scottish people of their freedoms as they take their wives from husbands, children from parents, homes from families, and land from the people. The final statement made by Mel Gibson's film was the first time I really understood that there are worse things than death. What is one truth that you would be willing to stake your entire life on? If it cost you everything, is freedom actually worth it?
Where would you draw the line in the sand if the government tried to take something from you forcefully? Where would you actually stand and fight?
The Matrix. Now, without a doubt, you know of this movie even if you haven't seen it. The scene where Keanu Reeves is offered a red pill or a blue pill in order to truly wake up or fall back asleep has taken on cultural meaning and is now a household term.
The other cool thing about The Matrix is that it's kind of a mini Jesus story. And there's actually a lot of movies and films and even shows that mimic or kind of echo the story of Christianity. I mean, Lord of the Rings, Narnia. So in terms of like what age, like I wouldn't show my 6-year-old The Matrix yet, although I really want to, right? But I can show them Narnia, The Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and all those movies. And when they get a little bit older, I can show them Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, not necessarily The Hobbit. I mean, The Hobbit was, but The Matrix is like the grown-up version of that. So there's a lot of movies that echo this story, and while it's not one-for-one accurate, it certainly brings up great questions about like, hey, who is Jesus in this story? Who is Satan in this story? Who are you in this story?
If the red pill is just uncomfortable truth, what is a red pill that you have taken in your own life? What modern systems feel the most like the Matrix? News, social media, politics, or is it something else? And finally, if you woke up outside of the Matrix tomorrow, what skill set would you wish you had prepared?
And a bonus question, if you could plug into the Matrix and get any skill set in the world, what would it be?
Swiss Family Robinson, one I grew up on. So this is a movie anyone can watch with kids of any age. Now in this story, a family is seeking freedom and opportunity only to crash land on a jungle island as they are pursued by pirates and face the elements of the jungle. There is a love story, some DIY hand grenades, and tree forts. And yes, while it is an old Disney movie, it is also every man's dream encapsulated in the art of film. Who in your family would fill which role on that island? Are you the builder? Are you the scout, the medic, or the planner? What do they do right, turning disaster into a home? And what do you think you would do differently? Finally, what is one small island skill or disaster skill that we could realistically practice this year?
Letters from Iwo Jima. People who decide on wars aren't ever the ones paying in blood. Now this movie shows how in conflict both sides see themselves as righteous, which is important to understand when understanding your enemy. It's even more important to understand in the workplace. People you work with that you don't like, they probably think they're in the right. See, this movie will change how you build rapport and relationships with those you disagree with. You don't have to make enemies out of people. But also it shows how when leaders of nations or communities weaponize support, all they're really doing is manipulating you to do their dirty work. You see, the Japanese spent years indoctrinating their people to the point where the population saw the emperor as a savior and saw Americans as evil monsters and brutes. So when it came time to go to war, they didn't need any convincing. Now, the same is true in companies and online communities. Influencers and celebrities, big and small, they amass followings over the years and then sick those followers on others to bring them down and to build themselves up. And I would just like to say, this movie shines a light on how you should be wary of dynamics like that. Be wary of being a foot soldier of negativity and hatred towards people you don't know, for authorities or celebrities or influencers that you also don't actually know. You don't know these people. Did this movie change how you see the enemy in a war movie? And how so? How does propaganda shape the soldiers' expectations versus what actually happens? In their position, would you obey every order, or would you look for ways to bend or break them? And a bonus question, throughout American history, if you look at all the wars we've fought, which wars have been involved with a people, not a nation, but a people that we're actually opposed to? Saints and Soldiers. Now this is just an amazing World War II movie that most people have never even heard of. It was independently funded with a bunch of reenactors who donated their time and money to create an incredible movie about the hardships during the Battle of the Bulge and how a man of faith influences the men around him in the middle of the conflict. This is an incredible character study. It's very compelling. And this is one of those movies that I don't ever think came out in theaters. I just found it at Walmart whenever I was in college and I bought it, and it has become a favorite World War II movie of mine. Question number 1, what keeps these guys' morale up in the middle of all of this chaos? Number 2, how do faith and doubt show up differently under fire? And number 3, what do you think you'd cling to mentally or spiritually in a situation like that? And as a bonus question, what about Deacon's character and what about his actions truly changed the life of his teammates?
We Were Soldiers. This is another phenomenal war movie. So it asks questions like, what does it take to lead men? What are the realities of war for those both on the battlefield and families at home? And specifically, what was the Vietnam War like when we consider a superpower of the West against NVA soldiers with tunnels and AKs? And again, yes, it's a great war movie, but just like many Mel Gibson movies, there is a deeper story to tell, regardless of the age or stage of life. If you want a snapshot of the Vietnam War with some hard truths mixed in with what it takes to be a man, keeping promises, risking your life for the sake of others, being well-read, and even the value of family and faith, this movie is a great piece of art.
And if you're a homeschooling family, it's actually really cool to watch this film and then go take a field trip to the Hal Moore Memorial Museum in Bardstown, Kentucky. And for all you dads watching this, if you time it up with the Bourbon Festival, you could have a really good time.
What does good leadership look like in this film? And who fails to show up as a leader? How honestly do you think this shows the cost of war on families back at home? And finally, if you were in that unit, what role would you hope to fill? Black Hawk Down, October 3rd, 1993, Operation Gothic Serpent. Now, this is now known as Black Hawk Down, but it was a mission intended to capture a warlord who had been attacking UN soldiers and taking supplies from those in need. Now, I grew up with a high school principal who was a ranger on that mission, and eventually I met Kyle Lamb, who was in Delta when this all took place as well. So for me, this film feels like a chance to get to watch and replay some of my heroes who lived through some of their roughest days. And this movie will give you a snapshot of the kind of men that actually fight our wars. In a famous monologue delivered by William Fichtner, we get to hear an explanation as to why men go to war and offer to continue to go again. This expresses the reason as to how and why humans push through the worst of times. When all hope is lost, where do humans go to pull strength from? And why do they continue to endure? What do you think the soldiers understood about why they were there? Was there ever a moment when you thought, you know, this mission should never have happened? And if so, when was that in the film? Finally, what skills outside of just shooting seemed most important in all of that chaos?
And as an extra bit of education, we filmed like a 3-hour interview with Kyle Lamb about his experiences in Black Hawk Down and what the U.S. military learned from that event specifically and how warfare for them changed because of what happened at Black Hawk Down. So definitely go and check that out.
Gattaca. Set in a not so distant future, society is split by two different types of humans, the valid and the invalid. Those who are considered valid are the designer babies that are manufactured for excellence, while the invalids are naturally born humans. Now, Vincent Freeman, our protagonist, is an invalid with a congenital heart defect who dreams of space travel, which is a field reserved for the genetically elite. Defying his predetermined fate, he assumes the identity of a paralyzed valid to infiltrate the prestigious Gattaca Aerospace Corporation. Now, as he navigates consistent surveillance, a forbidden romance, and a murder investigation, Vincent defies odds as he competes in life and defines what it actually means to be human. Now, this work will leave you thinking about the way to view other people today and the pitfalls of tomorrow. Parents always want their children to be better than them, but understanding what that really means will lead us to celebrate even the flaws of humanity, because sometimes our biggest weaknesses can become our ultimate strength. If your future were predicted by your DNA at birth, how would your life look different? Where do we already sort people today based on metrics, scores, tests, and credit? What are ways to resist being defined by labels that someone else puts on you?
As a bonus question just for the adults, at what age did you stop giving a crap about what people thought about you?
Minority Report. So this is set in Washington, D.C. in the year 2054. For 6 years, the city has been run by an experimental program called Pre-Crime, where 3 psychic humans called precogs float in a milk-like bath and have visions of murders before they actually happen. and police use these visions to arrest perpetrators hours or days before the crime occurs. The official murder rate is at 0. Now, Tom Cruise plays the role of Chief John Anderton, who is the head of the pre-crime field team. Now, this is the guy, the character in our story, who is actively going out capturing these future murderers. But in our story, he is seen by the precogs as being a future murderer himself and killing someone who he doesn't even know. Now, this preventative policing system has never been wrong before, but against all odds, Cruise has to uncover the truth behind a perfect system run by imperfect people. And the balance held between free will and a predestined future is ultimately expressed when the antagonist ends his own life and denies the pre-written future. Now, if you want to spark conversation around the preventative policing that we see today, an all-seeing government and the control we do or don't have over our own lives, this is the movie to watch.
Minority Report, like other movies, shows how authoritarian rule eats its own, and while you may not be the target today, the moment you step out of line, you will be put down. And today you can swap out those biological precogs with AI, and the story becomes even more realistic and imaginable.
Is it ever okay to punish people for something that they haven't done yet? How much freedom would you personally trade in order to guarantee lower crime? Do you see any pre-crime logic in today's policing, school disputes, or online moderation?
Silo. Now, this show is based on a series of books, which is absolutely phenomenal. I watched the show and then I read the books because I had to know what happens in the end. It is similar to Snowpiercer, but instead of a train, people live in a silo, and each level of the silo is a different class of people and functionaries. The top level is administration and power and control, the middle levels are markets and security, and the bottom levels are blue collar, the mechanics, the plumbers, the people who keep the silo running. And it shows how everyone actually needs everyone, and when any class refuses or is incapable of doing their job well and righteously, it leads to the resentment and rebellion of all the others. Specifically, it shows how when those at the top operate in secrecy and with no oversight or transparency, it fosters distrust among the other levels. Now, because this show is ongoing, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it does highlight how even when the elites are right and trying to do the right thing and actually protect people, if they operate in a secretive, clandestine way and aren't transparent to the people, it can still lead to ruin.
Silo is a great snapshot into the concept of leaders failing by leading through fear. How we lead our family, businesses, church, or our own minds has a trickle-down effect over time. Just like with parents who parent out of fear alone, it can cause an overreaction from their children. When a parent always tells their child that the world is out to get them and will crush them at any chance given, that's what the child will look for, and that's what they will see. Now, when a business owner is constantly telling their team that any wrong move will destroy the brand, the crew will be stuck operating out of fear and waiting for the rug to be pulled out from them. An outline like this is a great example of how two different people can get different insights out of the same piece of art. So if you're a parent and you hear yourself saying, "Because I said so," then you have to understand that that doesn't give your child any more wisdom or understanding of what you do know.
If you grew up in the silo, what details would start making you suspicious of the top level? Number 2, why do you think so many people accepted the rules without ever questioning the outside? And number 3, do you see a form of silo in current society where people are told to believe whatever the narrative is, and if they start to question it, they get pushed out?
V for Vendetta, another classic. Lines like,
Remember, remember the 5th of November.
Or ideas are bulletproof. Or people shouldn't be afraid of their government, governments should be afraid of their people. 3 key lines from the movie V for Vendetta that stick like a splinter in my mind. Now, the main character, V, is a masked man working to resist an oppressive government while winning over Eve, played by Natalie Portman, in hopes that she will understand how and why the system is so broken. The climax of the film, though not necessarily the most memorable, leaves us with an image of the entire population walking in lockstep, wearing the mask, and resisting tyranny as one big unit. Now, the movie does depict some moments of terrorism, and while it doesn't leave us feeling like bombing a federal building is justified, by all means, the story also expresses that there is evil and darkness intertwined with the actions of good men. In fact, this is a conversation starter around the concept that kind men are not always good men. and good men are not always kind. Also, do the ends justify the means? And it reminds us of the truth that when divided, a community cannot stand against a system. So if you are looking for a conversation starter after you watch this, you may ask, do you ever feel like division is sown in order to keep people from uniting? Also, do heroes always do what is right, or can they get it wrong at times?
This movie also shows you how bad things must be for an entire population to get on board with a revolution. It must get to the point where everyone has a common enemy, or at least most of the people, as well as the power of underground networks, the skill sets needed for pirate broadcasts and communication, and the use of symbols to unify dissent and to unify a movement. Now, one really cool thing about V for Vendetta is that we're coming up on the 20-year anniversary of the movie, and I know that next November, November the 5th, they are re-releasing it in theaters. So talk about an awesome field trip moment, an awesome movie to go watch with the family, if it's age appropriate. But yeah, V for Vendetta, absolutely must watch.
What freedoms did people in that world give up first, and why? Also, at what point would you decide, okay, now I have to resist, even if it's dangerous? And finally, do you think symbols like the mask are powerful or cringe? Do they help or hurt a movement, and why? Soylent Green. So this is a dystopian sci-fi thriller set in an overpopulated, environmentally devastated New York City in the year 2022. Now, the story follows Detective Frank Thorne, played by Charlton Heston, as he investigates the murder of a wealthy executive from the Soylent Corporation. The deeper he digs, the closer he comes to uncovering the corporation's horrifying secret behind its newest food product, which is Soylent Green. The climate of the story is that of an overpopulated city with depleted resources and a food source owned and operated by the one company, the Soylent Corporation, that holds the real power. Power over nutrition, population growth, cultural standards, and more. Meanwhile, the government is simply a shell that has been reduced to rubber stamping the privately owned corporation. While this is not the blatant purpose of the film, it is often a reminder to me that those in the public eye who say that they hold power are usually still held by the strings of the puppet master. Now, Heston has to work between the dilapidated streets and the lavish homes of the elites to uncover the truth behind the murder. More importantly, though, what did the murder cover up? And in the end, spoiler alert here, Heston delivers a line to a crowd in a church that may or may not have been received well by his audience. We don't actually get to find out. Heston proclaimed, "Soylent Green is people." The green food that has been fed to the population is not plankton found in the ocean. It's compacted proteins left over from human remains. And when I first saw this film, I was left wondering if I would tell the truth to the world if I knew that it would destroy everything that we hold sacred. Also, is knowing the truth worth your life and your family's lives? Now, this film and these kinds of questions actually influenced movies like The Purge, Logan's Run, Children of Men, Blade Runner, the original, Snowpiercer, and The Road. So yes, it's an older movie, but it's one that launched Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino into a new genre of filmmaking. Does this story make you rethink the FDA food pyramid and how nutrition is pushed on general society? How dependent are we right now on systems that we never question, especially around food? Do you think governments and those in political power are actually the ones pulling the strings, or do they have a master as well?
The Road. Now, this is a classic that a lot of people have already seen. It's a good look at the depravity of man. It shows how in a truly collapsed world, morality becomes a daily choice, not a rule book. It shows how in the vacuum of any sort of governance whatsoever, there will rise roving bands, cannibals, and widespread darkness with tiny pockets of decency. It's also a great example of worst case scenarios where mobility, caches, OPSEC, they're all important, and the psychological grind of a long-term crisis. In that world, what does it mean to be one of the good guys? What does it look like? Number 2, would you rather stay moving like the father and son, or try to build up a fort or build a small community? And number 3, what is one item or skill you saw that you think would matter most in a situation like that?
The Searchers. So this is just one of many old westerns that you should watch. And when I first saw this movie, I would have been, 8 or 9 years old. And it was the perfect age as it really sparked some questions that I had with my dad around being a man, treating people with kindness, and why good men have to do bad things at times. Now in this film, John Ford casts John Wayne as an anti-hero of the story. And John Wayne plays the role of a Confederate soldier who still isn't done with the war, while he carries the weight of defeat. Still, he fights with himself to set conflict aside and rescue those who are at the mercy of true evil. Now, when his relatives are murdered and his young niece is abducted by the Indian chief named Scar, I know, not very original, but Wayne sets out to hunt down and rescue the young girl at all costs. And over time, the audience sees how different individuals get to deal with failure, desperation, and the fear that justice will never come. And in many cases, we feel the fatigue that our characters endure as they spend years hunting the vast and untamed territory owned by Indians. Now, over time, we wonder if Debbie, the young girl, is now old enough that we wouldn't even recognize her, and maybe she's actually been passed over by now. Then, finally, the young woman is found, and she has been married to Scar for years. Now, at this point, she refuses to return and denies that her former life has ever existed. And Wayne, who has dedicated his life to eradicating those working for the warlord chief, finds himself at a crossroads. Does he kill Debbie, or does he become the abductor himself and force her back into a life that she no longer longs for? Now, I'll let you watch this masterpiece on your own, but some key takeaways that I had when I was young still echo in my mind today. Things like, what makes a man great? What does it mean to long for a family? And how does one find peace? Now, what if you get to the end of an adventure and you find out that it is not what you wanted in the first place? And then the final shot of the film, I'll give some answers, but Wayne is standing on the threshold of civilization. He is backlit, and it is difficult to understand what is going on in his mind. Then, after his mission is all over and the remainder of his family is together, our hero steps back and disappears into the wild unknown, which is to say, some men, though good, are still not meant for civilization. Is the role that John Wayne plays actually a good person? And what does it mean to be a good person? Is what John Wayne did when he found Debbie the right course of action, or should he have done something different? Finally, the way that John Wayne treats other characters around him in this story is pretty rough. Why do you think that is?
The Life of David Gale. Now, this is one of those movies that on the surface is about the death penalty. Now, do I think certain crimes deserve certain death? Absolutely. But what this movie did to me whenever I was younger was help me visualize the absolute brokenness of our justice system. It shows how narratives can be framed and evidence can be manipulated, and how justice can be turned into essentially theater, and how easily stories can be spun about you or anyone else. This was one of the first movies that helped me to see our current justice system as a gray zone. It's not black and white anymore. It's complicated and nuanced, and it really changed my perspective on it all. Question number 1, which crimes should actually be punishable by death? What flaws in our current justice system would have to be corrected to guarantee that no innocent person was put to death by the state? Which would be worse, 100 guilty men being set free, or 1 innocent man being put to death?
Apocalypse Now, the horrors of war. Now, this movie was the first that left me feeling like war offered no glory. There was no pride taken from conflict, and there was no value in combat. Then, years later, the concept grew in my mind, and I watched it again. While still horrific and feeling like I was partaking in a fever dream fueled by Grandpa's stories and Walmart melatonin, I was able to see the other side of the coin. That is, resistance to one's own side. When you feel as if you are on the right side of history, pick a team and embark on a bloody journey. The camaraderie emboldened by struggle often unites the human heart. Even still, what do you do when your own team are the baddies? How do you stay grounded? And what choices do you make when your own brothers are going crazy, making foolish decisions and causing terror? At what point do you think the main character starts to lose his own moral compass? Or does he even? Next, how does the film show the difference between the official mission and what war actually turns into? Do you think you could stay sane in an environment like that? Why or why not? The Big Country. Much like Apocalypse Now, The Big Country has the same theme as the main characters figure out that his wife's family are on the evil side of a feud between two families over water rights. And anyone who has been frustrated or even enraged by their own parents or in-laws will learn something as Gregory Peck deals with injustice in his own home. Instead of having a knockdown dragout with Charlton Heston over the kitchen table, he has a silent fight in the dark away from the house. Now, when this comes out, this enrages his wife, who had been expecting him to stand up and be obnoxiously loud in order to proclaim his manhood. Yet once again, Peck refuses as he fights for what is right, even when his own wife disowns him. Watching this with the kids is also perfectly fine, as it was made in 1958 and is a very wholesome movie. How do you see peer pressure working on the main character throughout the film? What does real courage look like here? Is it fighting, or is it refusing to fight, or maybe something else? Where in this story do you figure out that the main family is the bad family?
Children of Men. Okay, this is probably my favorite movie of all time. Not kidding, it's a #1 pick. Not just because of the story, but because of how it was filmed. It's a movie I showed my parents, and I remember my dad at the end of the movie having glassy eyes and saying, "That's probably how the world will be one day." It shows you what it looks like to fight for a future you'll never see, and choosing hope when the entire world screams give up. It also demonstrates how cities slowly break down in the middle of crisis. You have checkpoints, raids, random violence, factions of fighters, and it's also a great look at how to avoid conflict and blend in, and the importance of urban movement and mobility. Now, its premise is also not too far-fetched. Essentially, it takes place in a world where the birth rate is 0. A pandemic makes the entire world unable to conceive children. As crazy as this may sound, there's already ample evidence that elites of our world believe in population reduction and population control. And there's already ample evidence of certain drugs being used to sterilize populations under the guise of disease management or vaccinations. It's a sobering look at what could be in store for the future of humanity. How do people act differently in a world where there's no chance of a future generation? What parts of that society feel uncomfortably close to the one that we're currently living in? Would you risk your life for the baby in that story? And what would be going through your mind? And would you still risk your life if you had your own family to take care of and you weren't just a solo guy like Clive Owen was? Rescue Dawn. Now, this is the quintessential SEER movie, survive, evade, resist, and escape. There is so much packed into this film about the psychology of being a prisoner of war, the psychology of survival when all odds are against you, how to interact with other people in those same situations, as well as a lot of just standard like bushcraft tips and tricks. It will span the gamut of emotions that it pours into you. It's heartbreaking, it's uplifting, it's hopeful, it's depressing. It is everything that you kind of want in a movie, all set with a background of survival in the jungles of Vietnam.
Also, Christian Bale lost like 110 pounds in order to even do that film. It's quite impressive.
It's definitely a top 10. Question #1, how do you hold on to hope when every rational sign says you are not getting out? What different ways do the POWs cope mentally, and which character do you relate to the most? And #3, if you were planning an escape, which friend or family member of yours would you want to be in the cell with you? Or not want to be in the cell with you? The Impossible. Now, this movie is about a regular family in a mass casualty event. There are no heroics, just decisions. And it shows how in the event of disaster, infrastructure and official response is usually overwhelmed, and your neighbors or even strangers become your only safety net. It also highlights how important it is for you to understand medical basics, have a family comms plan, and how to navigate through chaos. Question #1, what choices did the family make before the tsunami that either helped or hurt them during it? How did normal people, not institutions, become the main source of rescue and care? And #3, does this make you want to do anything different about how you vacation or travel? A Quiet Place. Now, this is just a good movie about how your family is its own little government. It highlights the importance of knowing how to educate your kids and others around you, essentially rebuilding a society within your own home, and even being the security force for your own home. It also stresses the importance of sound and light discipline, which is, goes into the tactics of things, especially where the father of the family has to use sound discipline and actual sound distraction to hide from the aliens that can hear a pin drop for miles, and hide the light signature from bad actors, opportunists and raiders who can see light for miles since the whole world has basically gone dark. This is just a good overall movie for the whole family, and it will hit you straight in the feels. Question number 1, how would your habits have to change tomorrow if suddenly sound meant death? What do you think they did best as a family in terms of planning and communication? And number 3, what are the responsibilities that each person in this family has in order to protect the family as a whole? Jericho. If you have time to binge watch anything, binge watch this TV show. It's an early 2000s show that doesn't have any of the polish of modern day shows, but it does show how a small town has to band together in the wake of a nuclear event that wipes out the government and most of the American population. Now, this is probably the best prepper show or movie in existence. It gets into the complexities of leadership, of small groups, how those with personality and political differences find common ground for mutual survival, and how criminal elements factor into this equation, both bad and good, and how mob mentality can take over in crisis scenarios. Not to mention there's a whole sub-story that involves government corruption, foreign influence, and there's even a love story mixed in the middle of it all, so it makes for the perfect show for the whole family. And if you're a dude, you'll love this show, and your wife and your kids will like it too. It's pretty wholesome as well, since it was made for network television over 20 years ago. Now, the show was not popular, so it did get canceled after only 2 seasons, but among people like us, it was very popular, and we loved it so much that even though it was canceled, the showrunners took the final 2 seasons to artists and closed the story out in 2 graphic novels, which are also really cool. Jericho is a 100% must watch if you're into survival or preparedness. Any kind of, crap hits the fan scenario, you have to watch Jericho. It will also warm your heart. In the first few episodes, what small details tell you that this isn't just a temporary crisis? Who becomes more valuable in the town after the crisis, and who loses influence, and why? And number 3, what role does the main character actually play in all of this? He doesn't have one specific job, so what all roles does he have to fill? Okay, now we know that was a long list. Just so you know, we left so many out, and it actually hurt my heart to cut out a lot of these movies and shows just to make this, within a watchable time frame. But if there's a movie or a show that has greatly influenced you that we didn't mention, we've probably seen it, but go ahead and put it in the comment section for other people to look up and watch. Also, we cannot stress enough the importance of owning your own education and media. We rely on streaming so much these days and online that if that were to go away, we would lose so much of what makes us us and our culture. Culture and art, it's a part of being human. It's what separates us from the beasts in many ways. Cinema, literature, it's all way more important than we give it credit for. So don't just rely on, Netflix or Hulu or Prime. Get a DVD player, get a Blu-ray player, maybe even get a VHS, although I think that's actually probably the worst way to store information because VHS tapes freaking melt in the heat. But start to own your own information, and maybe it's not the movies that we mentioned here, maybe it's your own personal set of favorite movies that you want to pass down to your kids in the next generation. Go out and buy those and physically own them. We cannot stress that enough. With that, thank you guys. If you would like another iteration of this, we can do another episode like this where we include different movies and shows. Also, I know you guys have asked a lot about books we recommend. If you would like a video like this on literature and books and novels, we can absolutely do that. Just leave it in the comment section, and your wish is
definitely not our command.
No, but we would love to do it. So give us a reason to do it.
Yep.
Catch you guys next week. Some questions it brings up is, if the government banned books tomorrow, which 3 would you risk hiding and why? What would you risk hiding?
That's really good. Oof.
It's hard to...
Actually, it's hard to narrow them down.
I think if I had to choose a blend, it would be...
The Bible, but then it's 2 more.
Well, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't do the Bible because I just memorize it like Book of Eli.
There's so much in the Bible that I can't memorize. And
You just need to read it more, bro.
Jeez, dude.